Dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to AmreenaMehrajTutorials. As an environment enthusiast, I find it my moral responsibility to share this information with you all which I have pertaining to environment, specifically how we can manage our natural resources. This will be beneficial for students which are studying in various classes, be it foundation classes or medical students also. It's very informative. Do share it so that others will also come to know about it. Thank you. Let's get started.
So natural resources, my dear students, you might be knowing this term from your basic classes. Like anything which is available on the surface of the earth, which Almighty Allah has kept available on the surface of the earth, be it like soil, air, water, forests, wildlife is there, coal and petroleum are there. There are some important things which have been kept by Almighty Allah on the surface of the earth. They are called natural resources because we use these substances for our survival. So we can call all these resources natural resources. They have been provided to us by Almighty Allah. There are two types of natural resources. Number one are exhaustible natural resources which are present in very limited quantity, like coal and petroleum. If you'll use them continuously, they'll finally get exhausted completely. But on the other hand, we have some other category of natural resources which is called inexhaustible natural resources. You will find those resources present in unlimited quantity, like air and water. They will generally not get, depleted completely. They will not perish completely, although they can become polluted because of human interventions. Now it's our responsibility to also conserve these natural resources, be it exhaustible or inexhaustible. It's our responsibility that we should conserve them. We should manage their amount so that we ensure the same resources could be available for the future generations also. There are different laws which have been framed by national agencies as well as international agencies in order to protect the environment and the components of the environment, be it soil, air, water, and forests. You must have heard about the 3 R's which can be followed to save the environment. These 3 R's are reduce, recycle, and reuse. Now, what do you mean by reduce? When you say reduce, you are reducing the pressure on natural resources. You are using less natural resources. You are avoiding wastage of natural resources. If you avoid wastage of natural resources, you are actually saving your environment. What does recycle mean? Recycle is very simple. Suppose you have a notebook which is used. You have used all the pages of that notebook in your writing process. Now the same notebook can be used again to make or manufacture a new notebook. That's called recycling. Suppose we have a plastic bottle at our home which has become old, which has become worn out. Now we can recycle the plastic of the same plastic bottle to manufacture a new plastic bottle. Without putting pressure on environment, we can recycle the same plastic. Similarly, we can recycle the metals also. Suppose if some metal object, a copper vessel at our home has become, old, we can recycle the same copper vessel to make a new copper vessel rather than extracting new metal from the surface of the earth. In that way, recycling helps us to save environment. In the same manner, if we reuse something, suppose you have bought a jam bottle from market. Once you finish all the jam in this bottle, then you are supposed to throw away the bottle. But you will not throw it away. You will use this bottle at your home, in your kitchen, for some other purpose maybe. You can use the jam bottle for storing something in your kitchen. In that way, you are reusing something rather than disposing it off, rather than throwing it away. So reusing also reduces the pressure on environment and it helps in saving environment. So these are some of the ways in which you can save your environment. You know this thing very well that you will not be able to ride your bikes and you won't be able to drive your cars if they will not be fueled up. If you will not have petrol and kerosene and diesel available, life will come to a full stop. Okay, now where is all this coming from? It's all coming from your natural resources like coal and petroleum. These natural resources are not formed overnight. It takes them millions of years to get formed under the surface of the earth. Now, your population is increasing. Increasing population is exerting a lot of pressure on these natural resources and they are getting depleted. and they are at the verge of depletion. They may perish in coming 10 or 20 years. They may absolutely be gone from the surface of the earth. That means future generation will not be left with anything. In order to check this, in order to make sure that the resources which we are using right now, they will remain available to the future generations also, it's our responsibility that we manage these natural resources. So why do we need to manage natural resources? Because they're present in limited quantity and our population is increasing. Increasing population is exerting a lot of pressure on these natural resources, and they may be perished, they may be gone within some years if we will not manage them. So in order to ensure the availability of these natural resources to the future generations, we have to manage them right now. Today we have to manage these natural resources. Whom you can call a stakeholder. A person who is having interest or concern for something is a stakeholder. Now let us understand by taking forest into consideration. Let us understand who are the people who have concern or interest with forests. All the people who will be having interest or concern with forests, you will call them what? You will call them stakeholders of forest. Number one stakeholder of forests are local people. Local people who are living near a forest or within a forest, like tribal people. They get their basic basic things like if they want food or shelter, they get all that from the forest. So they are getting basic amenities of life from a forest. So they become the stakeholders of the forest because they have interest with the forest, they have concern with the forest. Number second is the forest department of the government. Now you know that all the land of a forest is owned by whom? Is owned by the government. So government, or rather the forest department of the government, also becomes the stakeholder because they have the control on the forest and they can also use the resources present in forest. Number third are the industrialists, people who have big industries. All their industries are running because of raw material. But where from they are getting the raw material for their industries? They are getting the raw material from the forests. Suppose somebody is having paper industry, where from he will get the raw material, where from he will get the pulp, he will get everything from the forest. So what is an industrialist? He is a stakeholder of forest because he is having concern with the forest, he is having interest in the forest. Similarly, there are people who are enthusiastic about forests, like they have a lot of interest with wildlife and a lot of interest with plants and all. They usually go on survey to check out what has happened to the population of wild animals in a forest. So they usually visit a lot. Those are called wildlife enthusiasts. They are also stakeholders of the forest. So anybody, a person who is having interest or concern with something, you can call him or her a stakeholder.
Sustainable management is a technique, is an approach in which resources are used by present generations, but in such a manner that a good proportion of the resources will remain available to the future generations also. That type of management is called sustainable management. Okay, now sustainable management of natural resources demands for something. It demands that the resources should be used carefully because resources are not present in unlimited quantity, they are present in limited quantity. So sustainable management makes it sure that resources are used carefully. Sustainable management also makes it sure that the resources are used keeping in mind the long-term perspective, that the future generations are also in need of these resources, rather than looking at the short-term benefit, being selfish and using these resources for ourselves. No, sustainable management has long-term perspective, keeping in mind future generation also. Sustainable management is also beneficial because it ensures that the resources are equitably distributed. That's called equitable distribution of natural resources. See what is happening currently, resources are being used by rich people more, and poor people do not have so much of the availability to these natural resources. But sustainable management provides resources equitably to the rich people as well as to the poor people. So it ensures that the distribution must be equal in different sections of the society. Even your sustainable management is checking the damage which is caused to the environment while we extract these resources from the surface of the earth. Suppose we are extracting coal from the surface of the earth. Although we require this coal for industries, but at the time of its extraction from the earth, we are causing a lot of air pollution and soil pollution. Sustainable management keeps a check on this environmental issue also. Okay. Similarly, once we have certain wastes which are produced during processing of natural resources, wastes are also produced. So wastes are very dangerous. We have to dispose them in a safe manner so that they will not be harmful for the environment, neither for air, water and soil, nor for the living beings. Sustainable management makes sure that the wastes are also disposed in a safe manner. So sustainable management is very important because it makes sure that resources are used carefully. It makes sure that people put long-term perspective under consideration, not the short-term perspective. It makes sure that these resources are distributed equally among the different sections of the society. It makes sure that while we are extracting the resources, damage is not caused to the environment. It also makes it sure that the wastes are safely disposed while we are processing any natural resource. Now let us understand more about forest and wildlife. Forests are biodiversity hotspots. Now what is biodiversity? All the life forms, be it plants and animals or microorganisms which are present on the surface of the earth, they form your biological diversity. Now what is a hotspot? Hotspot is any area which is full of biological diversity. So that's why we say forests are biodiversity hotspots, because they are rich in plants and animals. So you have a lot of diversity in a forest. We know that forests as well as wildlife are in danger because of human activities. So let us understand some steps which we can take for conservation of wildlife first. Okay, laws should be made to impose a total ban on poaching or killing of animals or birds. Unless and until we do not have strict laws, people will not stop poaching or killing animals and birds in wild environments. Similarly, natural habitat of wild animals is disturbed by human beings. When we go for deforestation, when we cut down trees, we are actually disturbing natural habitat of animals and different organisms in wild. So we have to make sure that we establish more and more national parks and sanctuaries throughout the country, which will ensure that these animals will get their natural habitat back and their population will come back to the normal. Similarly, government also has this responsibility that it should go with a periodic survey in the forests and national park as well as in sanctuaries. Surveys must be done to see what is happening to the population of species. Is it normal and increasing, or is it further decreasing? If it's further decreasing, that means that there is poaching still happening in these protected areas. So government has to go with continuous survey in these protected areas to ensure that the wildlife is actually being protected. Similarly, special attention must be paid to the conservation of endangered species of wild animals and birds, because endangered species are already at the verge of extinction because their population is very low because of human activities. We have to make sure that their population shouldn't become extinct. So we have to be giving special attention to these endangered species, like we have hangul in our state, which is at the verge of extinction. It's an endangered species. We have to make sure that its population remains under survey and continuous surveillance. The unauthorized felling of or cutting of trees, the illegal cutting of trees rather, for trade purposes or for getting fuel and all, that should be stopped. Unless and until that won't be stopped, we will not be able to preserve our forests, neither we will be able to preserve our wildlife.
You people are well aware of the fact that a large percentage of the forest cover of Earth's surface has been lost. Why that has been lost is because of human exploitation. We are, cutting down trees ruthlessly for firewood purposes, for timber purposes, for wood, for construction purposes. We are clearing forests to create roads, to create railway tracks. We are clearing forests to get more and more raw materials for our industries. We are clearing forests for construction of dams. So we have enough number of reasons due to which the cover of forest is getting reduced. Now what we can do for conservation of forests is we can go for programs like afforestation. In case of afforestation, my dear students, what is being done is that we select a barren piece of land in which there is no vegetation, and we start planting trees in this barren land so that it can be converted into a forest. So this technique of growing forest on a barren land is called afforestation. One such afforestation program is Vana Mahotsav, which is celebrated in India twice a year in the month of February and July. Both government agencies, people of government agencies and voluntary agencies come up and they go with this plantation drive. They plant a lot of trees on this unbarren land so that this unbarren land will be converted into a forest. Similarly, we have a technique called reforestation, in which a damaged forest is again developed into a new forest by planting trees in that particular damaged forest so that it can be revived. That technique is called reforestation, in which you convert a damaged forest back into a fully fleshed forest. And similarly, you can do one approach is that you can start planting those trees separately which are required by industries. You will plant those trees separately so that industries will get their raw materials from that cultivation without posing any threat on natural forests. And you know that a lot of cattle, they need food, they go for grazing, and that grazing is also posing a threat on the forest cover. We have to make sure to keep a check on the grazing which is being done by cattle so that forests will not be over exploited. So 4 techniques are over there which are very simple. Afforestation we can do, reforestation we can do, we can keep this commercial forestry separate, in which we will cultivate what? We will cultivate those plants which are required by the industry so that they will get it separately without posing any threat on natural forests. And we have to keep a check on grazing by cattle so that the forest cover will not be affected. This was all for today. Inshallah, other topics we will take next week.